I'd like to welcome you to this month's FF Distance Edition, hosted by the Chicago headquarters of Studio Gang. They also have offices in New York, San Francisco, and Paris. For those of you new to these programs, we've reinvented the League's popular in-person, studio-based First Friday receptions, tours, and project reviews with virtual visits to design studios across North America. In essence, these programs continue to provide the opportunity to get a sense of the studio culture, to see where and how firms are working, in addition to seeing and sometimes even touring recent projects or work in progress. You can find videos of past studio visits on the League's website, and upcoming programs include Los Angeles-based LA Mas in May, and in June, Rosana Montiel, Estudio de Arquitectura in Mexico City. This year's series is focused on architecture practices who truly expand disciplinary boundaries by taking on multiple roles, including design advocacy, fabrication studies, research, and community engagement. Studio Gang design principal and partner Juliana Wolf and principal and chief people officer Claire Kahan will lead the office tour and design presentation, which I'm told will include a few projects: Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts, Beloit College Powerhouse, and Tom Lee Park, all part of the firm's projects that focus on restoration and reuse. Juliana has directed the design of some of the firm's major projects, including the Writers Theater, the Arkansas Art Center, and Beloit College Powerhouse. She's also the deputy lead designer for the O'Hare Global Terminal, which is the studio's largest project to date. Juliana is a graduate of the Architectural Association in London, where she received a Master of Science in Sustainable Environmental Design and remained following graduation to teach as unit master at the Diploma School. She holds a Bachelor of Architecture degree from IIT. Claire leads strategic programming and operational initiatives for Studio Gang. As leader of the firm's people team, she oversees the curation of the studio's 4 offices, designs administrative systems, and shapes continuing education, cultural, and mentorship programs. Claire previously led the practice's exhibitions and special projects and has worked on some of the studio's large-scale projects, including the strategic framework plan for the National Aquarium in Baltimore. She received her master's in architecture from Tulane University. The program will be moderated by architect and educator Jonathan Solomon. Jonathan has directed design schools in the US and abroad, served as curator for the US Pavilion at the Venice Architecture Biennale. He is currently a partner at the Chicago-based firm Preservation Futures, an editor of the journal 45, and a director of the gallery space P11. Following the presentation and Jonathan's discussion with Juliana, Claire, and members of the Studio Gang team, the discussion will be open to all attendees, at which point we'll hope you turn your cameras back on. Please keep them off along with your microphones during the presentation, and you probably want to put your screen on speaker view during the presentation too. You can pose your questions in the chat section, and when possible, and if you feel comfortable doing so, we invite you to ask them in person by raising your hand, and we'll unmute you when we get to the discussion time. Finally, information will be posted in the chat section for those seeking CEUs. So thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing more from our speakers and seeing the studio tonight.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you to the Architectural League. We're super excited to join you from Chicago. Juliana and I will lead the tour, and we'll be joined by a couple special guest cameo appearances from studio members here in Chicago. So without much further ado, I'm going to be the one sharing my screen and trying to turn it on and turn it off seamlessly. So, you know, take a sip of your beer while I make those transitions, because they might not be the most seamless, but get started. So you should be able to see my screen. And so today we're sharing a studio tour of our office in Chicago. Studio Gang is led by Jeanne Gang. She founded the firm over 20 years ago, and we've grown from a small start into a firm of over 120 people. So this is us today. We are a close-knit bunch that have been working in our 120 different offices all around the world over the past year. So we're really excited to get back here today and eventually come back together in our 4 offices. Chicago is our main headquarters. We've been here for about 20 years, although we moved into this building, the former Polish National Alliance, about 5 years ago. Juliana will share more about the history of the building, its significance in the neighborhood, and the renovation we did to turn it into an office and workspace. We also have offices in New York, San Francisco, and Paris. If you're not familiar with our work, come on down to Chicago and we'll give you a tour in person one day. This is an image of a few images showing the variety of scales that we work at and the different types of projects we do. This park here in the foreground is the Nature Boardwalk at Lincoln Park Zoo. This is an ecological restoration of wastewater infrastructure here in the Chicago, turning it back into a thriving 10-acre park with places for people to gather and connect with nature in the city. That's one of the themes you'll see throughout our work. This is an image of St. Regis Tower, also known as Vista Tower, here in Chicago. It's under construction and will be opening, I believe, later this year. This is the Gilder Center for Science Education and Innovation at the American Museum of Natural History in New York. Hopefully you in New York are familiar with this project. It's under construction now, and this will be a new entrance and exhibit hall for the American Museum of Natural History, parallel on axis with the Central Park West historic axis. These are some current images of a rendering, a mock-up of this amazing structural concrete canyon wall that will frame the interior, and some pictures of a recent construction visit. We also do, smaller scale material testing installations. This is the Hive at the National Building Museum. This was testing the structural capacity of paper. These are all paper domes that create a structural dome in the amazing National Building Museum Hall. Some images of that material. And we also work on urbanism projects, and we work with communities. These are some recent work we're doing currently in Chicago in the Garfield Park neighborhood, building on work we did for the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice in New York. So looking at working with community partners at a community scale to look at neighborhood safety and communities. And today we really want to tour you through this building. As I mentioned, we currently are mostly working remotely, but our building is open, and this event actually brought the 6 of us together tonight. So it's really great to have the opportunity to have an event like this and have reasons to come together once we're getting used to working from home. So here's our building in Chicago. We're in the Wicker Park neighborhood, and we're going to bring you inside today and show you the things about the physical space that really allow us to connect and collaborate, make things by hand. And we've organized ourselves inspired by our favorite game, and we've positioned ourselves all throughout the offices right now, and we're spread apart, but we're excited to share our favorite spots in the office with you and show how it helps us work. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Juliana in the library.
Hi, everybody. Nice to virtually meet you. Well, so the first stop in the tour that I want to share with you is the library, which is indeed my favorite spot. So we try to get a little bit of a wide angle going, so at least you have some impression of our physical space as well. And so the library is a really important space to us because we are a research-based practice, and we start every project with an in-depth research phase. And so with that, maybe Claire, if you want to start the slideshow, restart the slideshow. Yeah, so at the beginning of each project, we are compiling a bibliography, and we are, so next slide, and we are doing a lot of reading about the environment we are operating within, the client, and so on and so forth. So our project tables start to look like something like you're seeing on the screen right there. And so the books are certainly a tool, but really the building as a whole has become a sort of tool for research for us. So what you see on the screen there is a bird's eye view of the building we are in right now. And it is the former Polish National Alliance building. And I'll show you a few images in a second here. But first, I wanted to point out the roof is also a laboratory, and Alyssa is going to tell you more about that. Well, I'm going to take you on the inside and talk a little bit more about the building as a sort of tool for laboratory, if you will, to investigate strategies for reuse. So on the screen is the building as it was constructed initially. So we're lucky to be in a building that has really amazing bones. It was built in 37. And when we moved into the building, if you go to the next slide, we really wanted to take it down to its essence, to the historic features that were built in the 30s. So in the meantime, the building had been used for many other purposes beyond the Polish National Alliance. And we essentially took out everything that was not original as a first step, and then inserted, if you will, the kind of new elements that help us make it function as an office. And so this is again, this is actually, I would be sitting right in the center of that image there in front of the book wall at the end, and the doors between the books is where Jeanne's office is located, which used to be the office of the president when it was built for the Polish National Alliance. So it still is, in a way. We didn't change that. Next slide. And so we kept a lot of the original woodwork that was in the building. So that used to be the view of what used to be the boardroom, which has this really amazing wood paneling. And so we used that to become our kitchen and kind of communal eating space, or also just workspace outside of the times people would be eating. Next. And there are this is another image, which is the historic stair, which we kept and made kind of remade it into a centerpiece that is connecting the levels. And because we have moved onto 2 levels, so it was really important for us to connect those levels also visually. So we inserted this really large mirror that you see on the left there, so the 2 levels can actually see each other. Next. And so this kind of thinking about how to reuse existing buildings is something that is important, of course, because, well, several reasons. One, of course, being sustainable approach, where our existing structures, they hold a lot of embodied carbon, and really the most sustainable building is one that exists already. So we want to show and continue to investigate creative approaches of reusing or adaptively reusing existing structures. And also there is a certain kind of identity that goes hand in hand with these structures. So this image is of the Beloit College powerhouse, and Beloit is a industrial city that is based on manufacturing, and the kind of energy required for that is very much part of the identity of the city. So it's important for that reason too, to think about not only how to reuse the structures, but to a certain point, because in this case, it's a structure located to the heart of downtown, right adjacent to the river. It's actually, how do you create a space that actually draws the community in and creates that access to the river. So that was the goal there. And we'll just go through and I'll show you some images of what the building is looking like and how it was developed. So this is the initial first phase of what used to be Black Hawk Power Station. And from there, that was in the 19th century, and from there, as the demand for power grew, the building also grew with consecutive volumes to the north. So there are the several phases you can see there. And when we encountered the building, it was, next slide, it was looking like that. And that is kind of the northernmost volume that you see there. What's on the left are the scrubbers, which were a response to the Clean Air Act, which were removed, but the rest of the building was retained, and we added on following kind of the succession of the movement in north. So the new volume is kind of indicated by that dashed line. And there you can see the diagram that shows this new volume, which is the field house that is used for athletic activities, but also farmers market and community program. And we'll show you some images of what that then looks like. So there's an image of the existing power station, the field house, and the bridge. On top of the image is actually a new bridge that is connecting the powerhouse to the student campus across, bridging this street, which has pretty high speed traffic crossing underneath it. Next. And then going to the interior. So we were truly inspired, in a way lucky, that the bones of this building also were so strong and promising. So really felt that there is this amazing potential to think of that building almost like a gigantic jungle gym, where we have already this really robust structure in which we can insert the new athletic and academic and social program. Next. We also found a lot of incredible artifacts that were part of the actual power generating engine, such as these kind of upside down pyramid shape elements are the coal hoppers that brought the coal down to the turbines. And they are of a size where you can actually use them as a room. So they are became a bar, and even have the potential to be a climbing wall, etc. So that's what we found. And next. We'll show you then what we inserted into the building. So again, there's the field house to the left that you see there. The kind of main level in the center is has a restaurant, kind of lounge space. We also inserted a lecture hall, and all the way to the right is a pool. And what was really important to us and to the college is that all of these activities are visually connected, but that you feel really connected to each other among the student and faculty bodies. So trying to break down the silos of the different departments. So we have this running track, which you'll see some images of in a second here, that connect all of that. So this is now what it looks like now, and it just completed last year. And so you see the coal hoppers, which are these prominent images, elements on the right there. So again, on the upper levels, you can actually enter them and use them as spaces. And then you see this kind of how the existing steel structure received new program and new level. So the workout fitness level is kind of inserted where that stair takes you. Next. And then this is looking a little bit further, kind of rotating your viewpoint, so you start to see the exterior wall and the running track that is circling up there and is connecting through all the different volumes, including, so you get glimpses into the pool, and on the other side it connects and wraps around the field house. So as you run around, you literally run through the entire building and tie it all together. And next. There's an image of what that is like. So it's certainly, I mean, I personally don't love running that much, but I think I would even enjoy running on that track, because it's quite entertaining, the different views you get. Next. There we go. And I'll see you again in a little bit.
Juliana, we're gonna move over and find Chris at his project wall. Chris, what are you working on? And great.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Bennett. I'm at the project wall with my cup of coffee. So I don't think you can see too much depending on how big your screen is, but I'm a senior project leader. I'm an architect. I'm leading the Tom Lee Park Memphis project. And just to give you a little context, one thing, as Juliana was saying, that we do at the studio is really immerse ourselves in a wide range of scales. In the background over here, these are some full scale construction drawings, so we kind of understand detailing. This is a 1 inch is 3, or excuse me, 3 inches is 1 foot canopy model. And that structure that you'll see in a second, here's a 1 to 40 of that structure that we call the civic canopy for the Tom Lee Park project. So just to say, it's a lot of bridging of scales in media that we do in the studio on a regular basis. So I think with that, I'll jump into the slides, Claire, if you want to jump that back. So the Tom Lee Park project is located in Memphis, Tennessee. So just to give everyone a little sense of context, this is the site. Essentially, it's a 30-acre park named after Tom Lee, who was an African-American Memphian who saved 32 lives in the Mississippi River when their boat capsized. So it's a very important site and Memphian that we're kind of working on the legacy of. But in terms of the site itself, it's a 30-acre park. It's built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So it's essentially a dike structure that was filled with dredge fill from the Mississippi River. So from our perspective, shown here, it's a very wide open, flat site. So we have this great opportunity to reimagine, what could that be as we kind of reimagine the park. Next slide. So we are working with Scape Landscape out of New York. And what's unique about the site is that it's right on the Mississippi River. So just the idea of things happening on this site are already elevated by the dynamicism of the river, the siting on the river, this condition or this specific area in Memphis, the river fluctuates 57 feet over the course of a year. So to think about at moments, as you look across the river, it's almost a mile wide and as little as a couple hundred feet, depending on kind of the level of the water. Next slide. So for us, we draw inspiration on this project from the river. As I said, also the kind of timber and lumber industry of Memphis. It was once the hardwood capital of the world. And of course, the very pervasive river and barge traffic that took the form of kind of log rafts at the turn of the century. And of course, now just the massive navigation industry that occupies the river as well. So there's a really interesting kind of post-industrial and then kind of turn of the century working waterfront that we're working with as well on the project. Next slide. So just a real kind of big picture. This is the site plan on the top. As I said, we're working with Scape Landscape that's designing the landscape. And we are kind of focused on the architecture. So on the bottom here, just kind of calls out some of the key structures across the site that we're working with. So what we call the point bar pavilions, these are kind of the amenity structures of the park. And we'll show a little bit of detail on those in a second. The large civic canopy, this is a large open air civic space that can play host to a multiplicity of events. And that was the model that I showed at the beginning here in the studio. And really unique to the site is what we call the tail-out trail. This is an area of the park that essentially is really kind of a wetland. It's an area where the U.S. Army Corps essentially didn't kind of complete the dike wall down there during construction. So it has this really great ability to be kind of hovered over and experienced from a new perspective. And that's where this elevated trail takes place down there. So we'll show some images of that in a second too. So just a little detail, these are the point bar pavilions. As I said, they're just kind of gems of buildings. They provide food and beverage. There's a cafe on one side, food and beverage on the other, restrooms, park storage, things of that nature. And kind of harkening back to some of the log kind of rafts and kind of riverfront history, we're kind of drawing this inspiration from a kind of a raft wall or a log wall assembly. It's our structure. It is our interior finish, our exterior finish, and it just has a really great mix of textures that kind of blend the history of the site together into a new context. So on the next slide, you can see some of the mock-ups that we're working on. So this is a mock-up of a portion of the log wall that you just saw in the previous image. And essentially, as kind of Juliana mentioned, and as I showed earlier, we're very hands-on. We like to see things at full scale. So just this singular mock-up of essentially a 4-foot section of the wall already kind of daylit so many details that we need to still work through, and also kind of we can learn from even still. So this is just a detail of that wall. Next slide. And just some quick images to close out. This is that tail-out trail, as we called it. It's an elevated walkway structure at the kind of south end of the park. And what's shown here on the ground is essentially being kind of green. that's part of where that fluctuation of the river level will start to occur. So there's moments where you'll kind of see ground, and then there'll be moments where essentially you'll be hovering over water, which will be pretty amazing. Next slide. And this is the civic canopy, as we call it. It kind of has a little bit of everything for it. Kind of day to day, it's a large open gathering space. But the intention is that during certain times of the year, it can be kind of used for private events, public events, festivals, music events, things of that nature. So it provides protection from light, from water, and it's just kind of a great spot, large enough for kind of a wide range of events right on the river. So we're very excited about that too. And I think that should do it, Claire. I think there might be one more. I think that's it.
I had a quick question, Chris. Can you speak about the community engagement that you guys did as you were locating these elements and deciding what should be in this park? Just curious.
Yeah, great question. We, as part of this project, actually, we kind of developed our own youth engagement program. We called it the Youth Design Leadership Program, and we engaged with local Memphis kids to kind of become a part of the design process. And throughout the course of essentially our concept phase last year, we engaged a local community organization to kind of bring kids to the table to be part of the design process of this project, but to also just expand diversity and inclusion of who comes to the tables of design. And it's a program that we kind of started in Memphis, but it's actually starting to find its way into specific other projects that are ongoing in the office too. So more on that coming soon.
Thank you. I think that's, maybe you have one more slide. I wouldn't cut you off. I think we, oh, sorry, Chris.
No, it's good. Oh yeah, civic canopy, again, as I said, large open structure. Great.
Now we're gonna go see what Deanna is working on in the model shop. Deanna.
Hey, hi, I'm Deanna Aguilar. I'm full-time member of the model shop right now for almost 5 years. And I think this is a great place. I'll have no slides, but I'll give you a virtual free tour video from the shop that we call the heart of the studio, and it really is. So I'm just gonna flip my camera and I'll take you with me. Let me see here. So here is the main entrance of the studio. So we like to have it open, like the open space, so we can work more collaboratively with the studio, that they know what we're doing, they know, and they can join us some other time. So here we have several tests of hydraulic cements, like different tints, painting colors, like more of the landscape that we use in the auto models. Here is our full storage. We try to keep it very clean. We call it a clean shop. We also have a dirty shop that is in the house, is in the basement, that basically they work with wood. And here we can have our spray booth. We can relay on laser cutters sometimes, and 3D prints when they have some geometries in our project that are more complicated. But as the studio take very serious the modeling here, so we also like to do very hands-on, like the models, like materials that are recycled or can be composed, like museum board, cardboard. So we really try to do that, and coming again, just different scales, as you can see here, and a little bit in here also. And there's for example, some tests of some roofs that we do that 3D prints. And going back to Chris a little bit, this is a mock-up that the shop work in, and this is an ongoing process model. And for example, over here we have our wall for different tests of materials, or what can they do each material. We just try to, again, treat this like a classroom. We can have all over there like examples of colors, palettes, and different scales too. And this is our treasure here, but that's it.
Deanna, can you share how you guys worked this year while you were at home?
Yeah, I mean, it was challenging, but never too big to challenge ourselves. We find different mediums to work from home, to just work more. The models can be more handcrafted, sorry, and we're just coming back and forward. We're just trying to divide and conquer some projects and the roles in here on the studio, and it was challenging, but we did it great. It was a good experience, but yeah, we all get a little shop in our houses, but it's good.
It was great to see that, the emphasis on modeling didn't stop. It wasn't, let's go all virtual, but it was rather really exciting to see you guys do that.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, modeling is very important. It's a very important part of every process in the project. So they just grow parallel with each process. We have a model for some concept to final modeling, and yeah, this is our task here.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
We're gonna keep the tour going. Up next, we have Andy in the archive showing us the next stage in the life of a model, where it goes next.
Yeah, really following the models. So I'm Andy. I'm the archivist and librarian here at Studio Gang. I'm here in basically our brand new archive space. It's in the basement of our Chicago office. So at over 20 years old, the studio has created a large archival collection of models, sketches, and other records, both physical and digital. So I have the pleasure and amazing job of stewarding all of that incredible material, plus managing the library and providing research support on occasion for design teams. So Claire, if you want to start the slides back up.
Getting better at this.
So because I'm not mobile, we'll just have a couple other photos of this new space. So because our practice involves exploring threads of inquiry that connect across our projects, our archive is a rich resource. So now kind of the intention with this most recent build out of our office was to give it a dedicated space so that it can be more accessible and visible for the designers than ever before. And it's been really great for me. We were slowed down by the pandemic. It's been a kind of a couple year effort, but we managed to finish up the last leg of construction, and it's been really exciting for me to be in a space that feels novel and kind of full of potential in this year that a lot has felt very static. So we're really excited to see what happens as we get closer to hopefully coming back together in person and how it really gets utilized. But as you saw in the model shop with Deanna, the bulk of the physical footprint of our archive, which is now this like physical space, but is also the collection that is created across all of our offices. And the bulk of the physical footprint of that collection are our models. And they, at Studio Gang, they come in a whole variety of sizes, shapes, and materials, which makes my job a little challenging, but is so worth it. It's been really amazing to me in my role here to really come to understand how, as a collection, the models really speak to Studio Gang's interest in connecting people. So in addition to being a beautiful object, I've come to understand a model at Studio Gang as a powerful site of communication, whether as pictured here, it is for a design team coming together to work through a concept or design options. And this also, so this was for Hive, which you saw in Claire's overview of some of our projects. And you can see that how models can both be very small or very large. And next slide. Or to communicate with models that generate dialogue with clients and collaborators, as here, looking at Writers Theater in Glencoe. And next slide. And then to more polished presentation models that communicate design concepts to a range of audiences. So in the next slide, you can see that when models graduate out of being used actively by the design team, they hang around on display throughout the offices. This is our wonderful wedding cake of towers, and there they not only act as prompts for inspiration, but also they can prompt knowledge exchange from the designers who work on different project teams. And then in the next slide, this is just a few vignettes and collections of materials that we pulled out recently that I think showcase the large variety of material in our archive. So we have sketches, other administrative and coordination records, ephemera, and material samples. So if we go through the rest of the slides, that I think just the wide variety of artifacts that are created during our design process really showcase our range of interests and all the rabbit holes we explore over the course of our projects. And then in our archive, we don't put them away in boxes and they don't stay stationary on shelves. We pull them out and reference them internally as precedents, or we use them to communicate things about ourselves to other audiences. So to transition, this is the Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts, which is currently under construction in Little Rock, which we were just pulling out the models and sketches created for that project because we're going to be exhibiting it at the museum when the new building opens next spring. And then I think Juliana is going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about the project because as Andy just mentioned, it's under construction right now. And we are very excited about the progress it's making. And we have not really shared construction photos of it with anyone really. So you're the first one, but I'll also show you, just explain to you a little bit of the background of the project itself. So it is really an addition and renovation project that we embarked on. And so the screen right now is the context we found when starting to work on the project, which is really, we were asked to create this addition, but it's not an addition to one building, it's an addition to 8 existing buildings. So there was an initial 1937 building, which is hidden right in the center of that mass there. Because of the popularity of the what used to be called Arkansas Art Center is now called Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts, it just expanded over time. And so what that led to was a lot of confusion in terms of visitor circulation. There was not an identity to the project that would announce, or to the building that would announce itself to the world around it. And despite being located in a park, it was really kind of choked off from the park with a parking lot, frankly, and a lot of asphalt. So those were the things we were trying to tackle. In addition to revealing the kind of jewel of the 1937, same year as our office, same style, that it was kind of at the heart and this hidden gem that we wanted to expose again. Next. So what you see there is an aerial view that shows again how the building was choked off from its surroundings, but also you see the plan view that shows the kind of crazy conglomeration of volumes and shapes that we wanted to clarify. And the solution to that, next, was to create an addition that really would cut through in the center this existing conglomeration of building volumes to clarify the circulation. And that addition is where it has an entrance on the north, an entrance on the south, and visitors circulate in between and have access to the various programs that happen on either side, making those visible to each other. By programs, I mean there is actually a gallery component, there's a museum school component, and a theater component. And so from the central spine, you can access all of them, while also the spine is offering additional new program for socializing in meetings, such as restaurant, a space that we call cultural living room, and so on. Next. And so in 3 dimensions, you see how that spine is interacting with the existing building volumes. It's kind of stepping down as the site is stepping down toward the south, toward the park there. And you can also see how it's reaching far into the park to connect to it, but to also have kind of much more transparent facade to the museum or center, which is very inviting, unlike the existing building that we encountered when we started the project. Next. And so this shows pretty well how this new spine is connecting to the various programs I was speaking of. So to the bottom left there is the museum school. The galleries are located adjacent to that, a little bit further up. And on the other side is the theater. And the 1937 building is actually becoming the new entrance to the north right there. So the what we call the blossom, kind of our new addition, is lifting up, and visitors walk underneath it to enter what used to be the original entry doors in the 1937 building. And so that's where we are now, which is, we are all pretty excited, I have to say. We, as Andy was showing, had a gazillion models of this roof, and now to see it in full scale is pretty exciting. So that's a photo that's maybe just a week old or so. So that's what it's looking like right now. And it's the contractor is working really fast to complete it by next year. And so just a few more images from the exterior to show you, this is not our project. This is what we encountered, just to show you the transformation. So that used to be the northern city facing facade of the building. And the next slide shows you the transformation and what it looks like now. So what's super exciting is that we were actually able to retain a lot of the existing structures and volumes and skins. Only the center kind of we sliced through it. And that's the northern portion of the blossom that is really inviting. It has the cultural living room, which is kind of a hangout space, event space on the upper level. And again, underneath that, there's a drop-off area, and you cross underneath it and enter the original 1937 building. Next. And so this is just moving around a little bit, centering on the building, the 1937 building. And the next image then shows the comparison of the rendering to the reality. So this is a little bit older of a photo. It doesn't show the facade yet, which is being installed, but it has, it shows the structure really well, which is this kind of V-shaped columns that also help with lateral stability, and then the curved beams that that kind of create this really dynamic space, but also are quite functional because the various pedals, they really lead into the like the entry to the gallery, the entry to the theater, and so on. Next. And then from the south, this is another project we actually collaborated on with Scape. And so Scape helped to make this gardenscape or parkscape, I should say, much more vibrant, and using it for rainwater management, where actually we are collecting the water on the roof, on the blossom, and it is funneling down or shooting down in a large rain event into those rain gardens where it gets filtered before making its way to the pond that's on the south of this park. And then a few more images. What the southern entry, the park entry, would look like. So that is also using one of these pedals to enter the building, and to the right of that is the restaurant with a very large cantilevered roof, because the project is in Little Rock, where it can get quite hot in the summer. So there's a lot of shaded outdoor space, which would be comfortable in the summer as well. And that's another image, closer up image of the restaurant itself. And then two more views of what it looks like now in construction. So you can see the structural roof, and that's a folded plate concrete structure, which is quite thin because the folds help to make it stable. And again, the same V-shaped columns that you saw on the north side already. And then going on to the interior, this is an image of the restaurant space itself under construction. And so we are working with amazing consultants on this, including, yes, there was a question, lighting designers. So in this case, it's a German firm called Lichtkunstlicht that are doing the lighting design for this project. And the structural engineer is Thornton Tomasetti, who have been instrumental in making the structure as elegant as it is. All right.
Thank you, Juliana. Wow, that was so cool to see. We're gonna head up to the treehouse, which is our rooftop pavilion, and I think Alyssa's waiting for us up there. Hey, Alyssa.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Claire. You've made it to the top of the building. Welcome. For many people, those in Studio Gang and our guests, this is their favorite space in the building. So I'm very happy to share it with you today virtually. You can see outside, it's a little bit of a dismal early spring day here in Chicago, but we'll be sharing, Claire, if you can go to the slides, we'll share a bunch of photos with you of this space on a beautiful day. But yeah, you can see behind me, we're really perched here above Wicker Park, with a rather distracting mural directly behind my head. But if you'll focus on the slides, you'll see that, yes, this is our building. And when we moved in 2015, we came to this building and the rooftop was just totally blank, nothing up here. If you can show that model, Claire. But we were envisioning that this could really be a spot where we could create this indoor-outdoor space up here, kind of a threshold where the city meets the studio. And so today we have this awesome kind of pavilion-like addition up here, along with a rooftop garden outside full of native prairie and regionally appropriate prairie species that is just gorgeous and lush when we're in that thick growing season. And normally in non-COVID times when we're up here, it's a very social place. We use it for all different sorts of events. This is an internal workshop. We've also done fun things up here like viewing the solar eclipse. It's a, you know, for all those times when a solar eclipse occurs, it's a great place to be. We also have all sorts of other people over here to the studio, whether it's a lecture event. We have had workshops up here. This was a couple years ago with Kanabari and Mabel doing a Who Builds Your Architecture workshop. We've had dinners up here. We have had all sorts of parties, from smaller gatherings for the studio to bigger parties where we invite everyone in. This was a prairie party. Let's see, this was an LGBTQ+ AI Chicago event using our awesome rainbow lighting system. And the last big party we had up here before COVID was the Chicago Architecture Biennial After Party. And I even managed to locate a picture of Anne herself. So we know that some of you have been up here, and we hope that many more of you can join us here in the future. But even when lots of people aren't up here, this is a super busy environment outside. We have all sorts of insect friends that live outside, a bunch of plants. I think we now have over 150 different species total that we have observed up here. And as Juliana said, I think at the very beginning, we called this our living laboratory, our garden, because the point of it is really for us, you know, the privilege. As we're going through this presentation, I just keep thinking of, from the perspective of New Yorkers, it must be so incredible to see that the privilege of having a whole building to ourselves here in Chicago. And so we are experimenting up here with how we can use elevated spaces in the city to foster biodiversity in the city. And so you can see every year we do, oh, there's me. Every year we're doing an event here called a Bio Blitz, which is a kind of citizen science adventure where we invite our scientist collaborators over and they lead us through measuring all of the biotic life on our roof. From all of our insects, what you saw me doing was soil sampling to test for microbial life and fungi, insects and birds, and we have found bats up here through audio sensors. So we are counting every year and we are essentially charting as our ecosystem takes root. And we were really excited 2 years ago when we achieved, it's called the Floristic Quality Index of 35, which means we have a genuine, thriving, new but genuine ecosystem that's growing up here. And this is most people's favorite species on the roof are our Italian honeybees. We have 3 hives up here. Right now, they're sort of still chilling out in the colder weather, but soon they will be out and about and we will be taking our usual bee selfies. And because I'm the publications director, a year or 2 ago, we decided to make a field guide to our roof. So this was a fun small book to make. We interviewed a bunch of our scientific collaborators, so their words are in here. It was supposed to be kind of a combination of a how-to book so that others can start to get excited about creating their own rooftop ecosystems, and a genuine field guide to all the different plants, animals, and insects that we find up here. And going forward, even during COVID, we've been doing a lot. Our latest adventures up here are using, these are called purple air sensors. This was air quality monitoring that we've been doing for the past year. This information from the sensors is fed in real time into a map that anyone can look at online to keep track of air quality in Chicago. And we have also been working with a great high school student here in Chicago, Jasmine, on a project to design and build a bat house for the roof as part of a project through the NAACP and the Argonne National Laboratory here in Chicago. So her work is actually being judged next week. So wish her good luck. And going forward, again, we're working with our local neighbors here to try to get them interested in also creating their own roofs, green roofs. And we have one neighbor already who is working on this, our friends at the Montessori school. And so eventually our goal is to have this kind of network of elevated green spaces within the city that are allowing our other urban neighbors to thrive here. So we hope you can come visit us soon and see for yourselves what it's like up here.
Thank you, Alyssa, and thank you all our Studio Gang members. That was our tour, so I hope you'll hang around for some Q&A and hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Claire, Juliana, Chris, Diana, Andy, and Alyssa for that tour. I have the pleasure of managing some conversation and channeling some questions to you. I just wanted to say how lovely it was to see such a well choreographed vision of the office space in Wicker Park. When I returned to Chicago in 2014, Studio Gang was one of the first offices that I visited, and I found myself back there many times in the office, in the treehouse for professional events, for parties and celebrations, for cultural events, so many times. It's really been a pleasure to see how that space has and how the office has developed, grown, and really become such an important part of the life of architectural culture in Chicago and in the world. We already have a series of questions from the audience, but I want to remind people that you're welcome to pose a question in the chat, which I can then direct back at the group, or to use the raise your hand function, and we can call on you and you can ask your question directly. I had a couple of questions myself, and one of them happened to overlap with actually a couple of questions already in the chat. Maybe perhaps overlaps best with Paul Glassman's question, what will the post-pandemic architecture office look like? How will safety concerns change how you collaborate? I'm really curious what, after hearing the discussion about the workplace shops that Diana described, the work from home shops that Diana described, after seeing all of you choreograph your movements around the space, and also after hearing in your presentation how important collaboration is to your work and how important place, kind of being in place, is to your work. If you have some thoughts about how the kind of lessons learned over the last year are going to change what the office looks like in the future.
Yeah, that's a great question. I could jump in on that one, although we're still, like everybody, still figuring that out and trying not to get too ahead of ourselves, although we're, happy about vaccines and we see a change on the horizon. We're just, staying the course and trying to figure out what's next. But I think what we're trying to do is be really intentional about how we use the space and understand these great assets that, it's been months since I've been here to revisit them. So just really taking stock of what they do offer us and how we can utilize those, when we're in concept or when we're, like Chris, working on a full-scale mock-up, and then also be really intentional about how we use the technology. We do have 4 offices and we work on teams that are sometimes split between the offices. We also have projects under construction that we visit, but we have to be very intentional about when we visit and how we can visit it either in person or in other ways. So we're still taking stock of that, but trying to lean into what we do have as a resource.
I imagine that this is the first question that gets asked at every first Friday, or has been for some time, since I know it's on a lot of people's minds. Maybe I can expand a little bit to talk about different types of collaborating partners. I was listening to Juliana talking about the Beloit College Powerhouse, and heard her say that the most sustainable building is the one that already exists, which is a very, I think, a very moving line and an important one for contemporary practice. I couldn't help but notice how much of the work that the studio does and presented tonight, including your office, occurs in spaces that are, in one respect or another, already existing, either under the umbrella of adaptive reuse at the scale of architecture, or remediation, environmental remediation at the scale of a landscape. And one of the great things about your work in that area is that you're able to talk both about the sustainability of that kind of work, and also about how historic buildings embody history and a meaning. And I'm actually interested specifically about how that kind of work overlaps with, or doesn't overlap with, historic preservation specifically, as a kind of category of architectural practice that didn't seem to enter the forefront necessarily of how you presented the work. I'm curious if you see how you see your work aligning with preservation practice, and where you see it diverging, and what that might mean both for your work and for preservation.
Yeah, maybe I'll go ahead and answer that question, which is a really good one. So actually, both for our office and for Beloit, we helped and pushed forward the landmark status for those projects. So, and that went hand in hand with a more stringent historic preservation set of requirements. So we are certainly seeing the value in recognizing and achieving landmark status, and working with historic preservationists to help us kind of find the fine line between preservation, but also a sort of regeneration or rejuvenation. So, you know, there is, we are not the experts in the historic preservation field. So we very much enjoy the collaboration, because there is some, there's not a clear answer of what should you retain and what has to be adjusted in order to make the projects adapted to their new uses. And so they, of course, have to function for the new uses. And that means a certain amount of demolition. It means a certain intervention within the existing building envelope and structure. But, you know, I think that so far we have not really felt there to be any tension, because frankly, the kind of historic, elements of historic significance are often the ones that really define the character of those buildings. And we as a motto always say, start with what's there. And so the concepts are really built around what's there, and the kind of historic elements of significance are the starting point. It's not the enemy. It's just the starting point around which we develop our concept. So yeah, I think that's I hope that answers your question. But that's how we see it.
Yeah, it does. It begins to, and I think hidden in that question was a kind of statement about one of the contributions of the studio's work, which is a kind of expansion of possible purviews for preservation, right? And it's good to hear about the landmark status, but it's also good to hear about how preservation, both as a kind of an ecological mandate, you know, and as an opportunity to retain history and meaning, can be integrated into the design process and doesn't have to be a separate legal process. There is a question, and it's a kind of a specific one from the audience, but I think maybe now is not a bad time to pose it. Brendan Wang asked if you specifically, if you replaced existing windows and other envelope components to improve energy efficiency on the Beloit College project. And I think that,
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's a great question. And I was actually gonna exactly bring up that point, that historic preservation, there is kind of a balance between that and energy efficiency and energy performance. So initially, actually, we were going to wrap the building on the exterior with insulation and, you know, bring it up to current standards of U value and air infiltration and so on. And then in the end, because of the landmark status, decided not to do that, but to leave the exterior exposed, which is something that was required when we did go for the landmark status. But nonetheless, yes, we still then decided to add insulation on the interior, and we did replace all of the windows, and they are, that was in very, very close collaboration with the landmarks department and also with the historic preservation consultant, where we were essentially keeping the sidelines and dimensions of the historic windows, but we're using double glazing, of course, as per current energy codes. And even in some cases, we were able to keep the existing window mullions, but just fit double glazing IGUs within those. So it found a good balance between also energy performance as well as historic preservation, I would say.
That's such a great. I'm so glad that that question prompted such a sort of timely and also precise response. I see we have another question which is relevant and which I know the studio will have some answers to, about daylight and how daylight influences the shape and form of your architectural designs. And I can think of a building in New York that might be leveraged as an answer.
Claire, do you want to take that one, or do you want to direct it to any of us?
I'm trying to think of what you're thinking about in New York, and my mind is going blank. But I think definitely.
I think
Sorry, I was thinking about the highlight.
solar is it? Yeah.
But I was also thinking about AM&H in New York, and so that museum, you can get lost for a day, and it's so immersive and amazing, and that's one of the best things about it. But it has no access to daylight, and so this new canyon brings daylight into a museum, which we don't have a lot of experiences with, and we think that really will orient people not only to that museum campus, but also to science, and really connect your experience of science in a museum to the natural world. So that, and then also Solar Carve, as you mentioned, in New York, how we actually worked through the zoning to change the zoning, because if we were thinking about not only daylight inside the building, but also to our neighbors. If we were to follow the zoning code, we would shade the Highline Park, and we would be giving daylight to the highway. And so we actually went through a process with the client to reverse that. And so that was something now that the building is carved in such a way by the sun angles, so it delivers daylight not only to the occupants inside, but also to the park. So it's something, and even as I'm seeing the sun setting on our screens here, I'm thinking about our building here and this deep floor plate, and how we're all wanting to be near daylight and sun and ventilation. And I think that's just so front of mind as we all are working these days.
Yeah, I couldn't help but notice that the museum piece, as you refer to as a blossom, right, or as a flower. And then we went immediately to the treehouse to talk about your sort of immediate proximity to and use as a research element natural life and forms in the city. And I wonder if it's too much of a leap to ask if there's a kind of a gross scale, like a large scale relationship between the form of that blossom and literal, sunlight derived forms in nature. Even if that building really, is quite limited, if that addition is quite limited in terms of its facades, it's actual.
Yeah, I think it's a really great observation and not a coincidence at all. I think we do draw a lot of inspiration from the natural world, and Alyssa is pointing out right there, from also shapes in the natural world. And behind me in Jeanne's office are a lot of her collection of leaves, of birds' nests, of stones, and the sketches you saw in Andy's part of the presentation, just observing natural patterns and sketching them certainly influences our thinking. It's not necessarily, a literal formal translation, but it's seeking of what forms why they exist in nature and how that can apply to our work. And I'll speak to the Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts in a second, but another example is a building we just completed in St. Louis, which is called the 100, which is a high-rise project which has an outline that is shaped like a leaf, if you will, a footprint. And the whole point there was to increase the access to daylight, so that every single unit could have corner windows, not just like in a rectangular building, the corner units. And the leaf shape itself is also related to access to daylight. It's so that more light, one of the reasons of what generates the form is to have more light filter down to the leaves that are at lower levels. So there is a relationship for sure. And in the case of the Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts, that certainly was an issue, because the collection itself is based on works on paper, and they are just so sensitive and fragile in a way that they cannot be exposed to daylight at all. But so we felt it to be very important to have these other spaces that people could talk about art and be around art, which is within the Blossom, that have access to daylight, while of course still not allowing too much direct light into the interior. So that goes back to the environmental performance aspect, where these large cantilevers are meant to keep direct sun out. And there were very in-depth studies of kind of form-finding studies that would optimize the shapes and the cantilevers exactly to those aspects that you are bringing up right there.
I want to remind members of the audience, we still have questions coming in on chat, which is great. I want to remind members of the audience that you can raise your hand if you'd like to pose your question in person on Zoom. I want to shift gears a little bit here in response to a question that Connor poses in the chat, which is, how is the office addressing gentrification in the city of Chicago and or elsewhere, given your emphasis on research, public engagement, and adaptive reuse? And maybe as a way to sort of seed an answer to that, it would paraphrase Jeanne. I could get the quote wrong, but that we tend to think that architecture is about building buildings, but it's about building relationships. And the shift in a project like the Beloit power plant or Tom Lee Park from a kind of machine infrastructure or natural infrastructure to a kind of people infrastructure, like an infrastructure that's about that is focused on relationships, as opposed to focusing on like chemical reactions like power generation, or literally holding water back, holding water where water should be, in the case of the park.
Yeah, I think I can jump in. I think it's a great question. Maybe Alyssa can comment too in some of the history in Memphis. The thing that's great about the project in Memphis is it's really built on 4 years now of kind of ongoing conversations and engagement. The project actually started with essentially a riverfront concept that was kind of initiated by the mayor's office in Memphis. But what our approach was to essentially arrive and listen and learn. It was a new city for us. We're not the experts. I think you've heard that kind of from us tonight. And essentially, what transpired was engaging with, government officials, nonprofit organizations, community leaders, youth, education, a multiplicity of voices that came to the table to inform why we would do what we do in terms of a concept. And it's rooted in kind of what we were hearing, and that's kind of the full transparency that, this is their city, our, Memphis, and we're here to kind of help and kind of leverage our design talents to bring those relationships to bear in a, proposed solution or concept. So as we were going through that concept process, also the Stone Stories project, which was exhibited at the Venice Biennale, was kind of interestingly kind of coupled. And I would say maybe Alyssa could speak to this a little bit more organically, kind of as we sort of identify a project for the Biennale and what we were doing. It just kind of dovetailed very nicely with the engagement and the story of what we were uncovering during our research process. Maybe Alyssa, you could talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's also a huge question. I think we're architects, we're always asking ourselves, like, what can we do about equity in the city? And of course, we don't want to be on the side of gentrification, and recognizing the complexity of forces and actors who are all involved in that process. I think Chris is right in that for us, it really starts with asking who's at the table and who has a voice in a project and who begins to feel belonging and build ownership in a project from the very beginning. So I think as an office, as we've evolved, we've become better and better at that. And we know we still have a ways to go, but of really working with our clients to identify stakeholders outside of the usual groups, who are, whether they are residents in this community, neighbors who will be affected, if they are kids who are in local schools who will be, for example, going to the American Museum of Natural History. There's all sorts of ways that, as Jonathan is nicely setting out for us, we can think about how the architectural project can build relationships beyond just that of between owner and architect, for example. And yeah, the Memphis project is a great example of that. And as Chris was saying, through initially doing this urban concept for the revitalization of the Memphis riverfront, we were then asked by Jonathan and the curators of the US Pavilion that year to participate in their project and look specifically at the civic scale of belonging in a city. And so we picked up on this space in Memphis that we had become really fascinated with, the cobblestone landing. And it was at a time when there was a lot of work going on, grassroots work going on in Memphis around taking down the city's remaining Confederate statues that were located in public parks. And it so happened that those statues came down just as we were beginning to work on this project. They were stone statues, representational, oppressive, suppressive. And so we were fascinated with this idea that this horizontal stone landing made up of a multiplicity of cobblestones, tens of thousands of cobblestones, 9 different types of stones, kind of the resonance there with the history of Memphis and the fact that enslaved people had worked on that landing at one point in time. So this was not a public space that meant the same thing to all Memphians. People had very different feelings about it. And through that project, we were able to really dig in and interview a wide range of residents, community leaders around that space, and around the types of change that all seemed kind of like they were just blossoming in Memphis at that time. And so that was it's just been wonderful to be working in Memphis, I think, like Chris was saying, for over 5 years now, and to really be able to see now this first built piece of the concept that we had envisioned now 4 years ago being under construction. And it will be a city park. It's a park for everyone. And we feel confident that because we have worked so closely with the community in so many different ways along the steps of this project, that we just can't wait for it to be done and for people from all over Memphis to be able to come to that park and just, I don't know, feel how special it is and just, I don't know, have a wonderful place. So I guess that's one example of what we're trying to do as best we can.
Architectural League, I see we're a little bit after quarter after. Do we have time for a few more questions?
Yes, we have
Great.
time. You can go up to about 7:30.
Oh, great. Okay, I see I jumped over a question early on, which also seemed very specific about the condo project in Miami. And I see that Margaret has followed up with some questions that seem related to that project. I don't know if these are too specific for you to answer in this forum or if you had a response.
Would you mind repeating the question?
Oh, I'm so sorry. There's a question from Margaret in the chat early on asking whether a condominium project of yours was canceled in Miami, and then asking about preservation in that city. It sounds like it's pretty specific to that project.
I actually don't know what project Margaret is referring to, so maybe this is a little bit specific, unless Claire, you might, because it was not part of what we talked about, right? So it's a project from the past, so I don't know which one, but Claire, maybe, I don't know if you have that.
I know we're not working in Miami currently, and but
sounds good. Well, in that case, I'll ask one more time to the audience if anyone would like to raise a hand and ask a question in person or to pose a question in the chat. And if not, then I would say thank you to the group, this group of 6 amazing tour guides. It had never occurred to me how much the Studio Gang office overlaps with the game of Clue. But having seen your presentation, I now feel that you must host a live murder mystery party as soon as it's safe to do so. I think that's what the space was made for.
Wow, before we moved in, it was the College of Office Technology, and I didn't even think about this till now. But so we moved in, and there were all these skeletons and things to practice anatomy on, and so yeah, we crafts ready to go.
What did you do with them?
Confidential. They're April Fool's props.
Thank you very much, all of you. If this was a totally fascinating presentation, and it's so wonderful to link the physical space of your office to the work that you're doing, and I think it adds incredible insight to understand it. I see Julio Pedota is saying yes, to really enlightens our understanding of the forms and of the underlying design sensibilities that shape your work. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming. And there's a note here about signing up for our weekly newsletter if you like. Of course, we always encourage people to become league members. And if there are past FFs that you haven't been able to visit, they're online on our website, as this one will be soon, so you can steer your friends to it once it's up and running. So thank you very much and good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for the
Thanks,
invitation.
everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.